Hello, welcome everyone. We'll wait just a moment here to let everyone get situated and get all their audio connected. Just to let everyone know that this program will be recorded and we're also streaming live on YouTube. So if you want to turn off your video, you can do that. We'll also ask that everyone stay muted during the program. We have a lot of people register, but you are to be able to ask questions for Dr. Masani in the chat. So we'll just wait just a few. We still have a lot of people joining us. Everyone is very excited about container gardening. Right.
Well, just let me know when you'd like me to start.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we
There's
have
still
most
people.
everyone. Still people joining here. So I'll just repeat it for the people that have just joined us. This program will be recorded. And if you don't want to appear at all, you can turn off your video stream. And we also ask that everyone stay muted during the program, but you will be able to ask questions in the chat. And we'll get to those as time permits. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. My name is Vanessa. I'm with the Dallas Public Library. And I'm going to turn it over to Helen Dulac with the City of Dallas Environmental Quality Services Department. I think I got that right this time. I don't know. And she'll tell you a little bit about what she does and introduce our wonderful speaker for today.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thank you all for spending your time with us today. This is going to be a fantastic presentation. We have over 240 people registered today, so this is going to be fantastic. And Dr. Joe has built his following, and we're really excited to close out 2020 with this presentation on container gardening. Again, you will be able to ask questions in the chat, and Dr. Joe has also been very gracious and has an extended Q&A at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to get this out of the way so we can get started with the good stuff. So my name is Helen Dulac, and I work for the City of Dallas in environmental quality and sustainability. And I am super excited to be partnering with the Dallas Public Library and the Dallas Seed Library on this series of presentations called Grow With Us. So just to give you a little bit of history about our department, because you probably never heard of it, we started in 2004. And back then we were called the Office of Environmental Quality. And we worked really hard for 4 years to help Dallas become the first city in the United States to achieve ISO 14001. And what that is, it's a way to deliver service or produce a product with as minimal impact to the environment as possible. So what the City of Dallas did, it looked at our operations across 14 different departments in the city to see how we could still deliver service and lessen the impact on the environment. So we looked at the vehicles we use, the equipment we use, the products that we purchased, and even the paper we put in our copy machines. And we get audited every year, and we're still able to maintain this after over 10 years. And another awesome thing about this is that Dallas was the first city to do this. It wasn't a city in California. It wasn't a city in Colorado. It wasn't Austin. It was Dallas who led the way. And so we're green, and we're just trying to go greener. So let's fast forward 10 years where a lot of changes happened to this department. So there was a restructuring in the city, and OEQ absorbed some other environmental operations and programs within the city and doubled in size. And to reflect that change, we changed our name. And that's when we became Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Also that year is when we created a combined outreach and engagement that includes zero waste and water conservation and stormwater education. So, and then the very next year, Mayor Johnson created a special committee to City Council called the Environment and Sustainability Committee. They meet the first Monday of every month. Those meetings are live and broadcasted, and it's a great way to see what the environmental pulse of the city is. You get to hear about a lot of new pilot projects coming up, and it's a really good thing to join. And then if you have heard of my department, it's because earlier this year on May 27th, the council adopted the first comprehensive environmental and climate action plan for the city of Dallas. So this is historic on multiple reasons. Dallas is one of the few inland cities to have a formal climate plan. That means a city that's not located along the coast, not near the ocean. And not only that, we're one of the first cities in Texas to have a formal climate plan. So we're really excited about that. You can see all 250 pages of the plan at dallasclimateaction.com. And presentations like this and future presentations you'll see will align with the CCAP plan. There is a section about food access and healthy food, and that's where this falls in. And also you'll see then as the city moves forward for the next 30 years, a lot of things will be in that follow that CCAP plan. So I mentioned that we doubled in size a couple years ago. What you see in green are the departments that joined us. I'm going to talk about one of those just briefly, and that is stormwater management. So stormwater is anytime water leaves your property. It could be from the rain. It could be from your sprinkler system. It could be from a hose that was left on for 5 minutes. So basically that water flows over your grass, down your driveway, goes into the street, goes all the way down those gutters to that big drain at the end of the street. That big drain is called a storm drain, and it's there for one reason, and that's to remove the water so the streets don't flood. Now, they do such a good job at that, and they remove the water really quickly that that water goes directly into a creek or a stream. It is not cleaned, it is not treated. It does not go to the wastewater treatment plant. So if that water picks up any pollution, that pollution finds its way into our lakes and into the Trinity River. So please just be mindful what you do outside. Don't put down excess chemicals in your yard or your garden. Pick up your pet waste because pet waste has bacteria in it. And also this time of year, leaves. Leaves are fine on the ground. Leaves are fine in your compost pile. They're fine as mulch in your garden, but please don't have the leaves in the street because they can go into the storm drain. They could clog the storm drain. And if they make it all the way into our lakes and rivers, those leaves don't belong in the water. They belong on the ground. So please just be mindful that pollution at your home or in your neighborhood doesn't always stay there. All right, so I mentioned the outreach and engagement team that I'm a proud member of. Well, we want to empower Dallas to save the earth. And we do that by virtual presentations like this and in person when we're allowed. You actually can invite us to speak virtually to different kinds, like your HOA, different kinds of clubs and organizations. We also have a lot of material for students all the way from K to college, and we can help out with seminars, activities, and events. If you invite us to speak, what do we talk about? Well, we can talk about environmental topics from A to Z, all the way from air quality to zero waste, plus that CCAP plan I mentioned. We also host some of our own events. Our most recent was the WaterWise Landscape Tour. That was on November 7th. You can virtually tour the WaterWise homes at savedallaswater.com, and you can see several homes that have zero grass, zero turf homes. Imagine your water bill savings. Imagine how much time you don't have to mow or trim or anything like that. So you can see beautiful homes in Dallas that have zero grass. Also, we have a website called greendallas.net. Check it out if you want to get more green tips. Also, that's where you can invite us to speak for your event. That's at the event request form. And also, if you ever have a question for me or anybody I work with, just send an email to greendallas@dallascityhall.com. And of course, follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Green Dallas TX, and at Green Dallas on Twitter and Instagram. So you can make sure you don't miss any cool programs like today's, and also see what we got new in 2021. And with that, it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Dr. Joe Masabni with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. And I'm going to let him get right into it because we have almost 50 people on right now, and they all want to know about container gardening.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I muted myself accidentally, and I hope you can see my screen. And thank you again. I think this is the fourth class together, so I hope for many more. I have mixed feelings about growing vegetables in containers because the first couple of years coming from Michigan and then Kentucky, where it was so easy, nature works for you, is your friend, here was a struggle. I had no idea how hot it can get, and I'll show you how where my container garden ended up being. But anyway, let's talk, but it can be done. Like always, like anything you want to do, prepare, study, and learn by doing, not just reading about it. And most importantly, daily attention, even if there's nothing to do, just daily check. So that you can catch a problem real early. If you follow these principles, anything is possible. A little bit of just educational information on container vegetable garden and why it's appealing. A lot of people have patios or live on the second floor in an apartment complex, but they still love to garden. And so it's excellent for such situations. But on the other hand, it is more, what do you call it, less forgiving when you plant in the garden, and if it doesn't rain for 2 or 3 days or for a week, the soil holds moisture, and the plant can wilt a lot slower than if it's in a container and then you forget it for 2 or 3 days. So it needs more knowledge, it needs more care in terms of watering and fertilizing. Of course, some crops are easier to grow than others. Like here you see a bean and then you see a basil. Basil will be easier to grow. It seems to be a little bit more drought tolerant than a bean plant or a pepper plant would be. First advice I can tell you, the bigger the pot, the better. Again, the bigger the pot, more root volume, more media, the media you're using have more volume to retain water longer. All right. In terms of plant selection, here's the advice that I can tell you listed here. Of course, many catalogs right now do mention dwarf, do mention things like patio or container tomato. Sweet and neat is a new tomato variety. So it's sweet and then the letter N and then neat. I tested it before and I'm growing it right now. I'll show you a picture of it in my greenhouse. It looks like just like the picture here. A cherry type tomato reaches a size and it does not grow anymore. So it's perfect for that. Just like this melon, bush type melon, you see, that's all the space it takes. It's not gonna run all over the place. So you feed it well, you fertilize it well, you can get 6 minimum, but let's say 6 small melons from just one plant that is in a 5-gallon container. So 5-gallon container to me is the minimum size if you want to grow any fruiting vegetable. For herbs, for any other root type vegetables, something shallow but will work fine. And this is a list. I'm not going to read it. I will send a copy of this PDF, of this presentation as a PDF file, so that can be emailed to all the participants. I'll send that to Helen. So you'll see here, sweet and neat is the first one on the list for tomatoes. There's a variety called patio tomato, which tells you Tiny Tim. That's a clue that it's a dwarf type tomato. Peppers, these are not really a dwarf type, but peppers lends itself to grow in a container because of its limited root system. So none of these are really dwarf type peppers. Eggplants, you see, so you as a vegetable choices, you see we have anything, you have a wide variety from fruiting vegetables, tomato, pepper, eggplant, squash, to lettuce, to onion, radish, parsley, cucumber, and of course all the herbs. You can grow them anywhere, just have enough light. Okay, containers and sizes. Here are different choices. This is what a cattle panel for water feeding. So that can be used. If you like to travel, I suggest you visit, and when you are able to travel, if you like to go to Noble Foundation in Ardmore, Arkansas, they have lots of containers like this and lots of choices and lots of ideas for the kitchen garden. So you see, this would be what I would call, I hope you can see my mouse, but in the upper corner photo, That is what I would call a 5-gallon container. So you see here carrots planted. And the beauty about container gardening is that it forces you to plant, to squeeze in more plants that you normally would. When you have a garden in the soil, you see unlimited space. People subconsciously space out the carrots further apart. Or like they put them 4 inches apart. But when you try to plant them in a container, you find yourself putting them 2 inches apart, and they can do well with regular watering and fertilizing. Of course, this is a picture on the bottom is a modified, I guess, modified container. It isn't a container, but I've seen these where it's in the ground, so the roots end up growing through the container and going into the ground, especially for big plants like eggplant and peppers. And or sometimes you can just put it on concrete, and this way they can't go anywhere. But I love this idea where they put mulch on the concrete as a way of insulation to cool down the concrete, and this way the pot does not dry out sitting in that heat pad, which is the concrete that's absorbing the heat all day long. So that is a great idea. And of course, anything. I've seen people using their, what do you call it, recycled bathtub. I've seen recycled toilet seat, and they filled it. Anything that has can hold soil or media and has a few holes on the bottom, you can make a pot and grow in it. Now, the container is not the problem. That anything, like I said, anything you can use and you like to use, that is not the problem. What is very important is the growing media. Okay, so I don't recommend you take soil from your garden and fill it in, unless you are from East Texas and you have beautiful sandy soil. Don't take the soil we have here, the heavy clay. And unless you're willing to steam sterilize it and like in an autoclave to kill all the diseases and kill all the weed seeds in there. So if you don't have that, then I suggest you invest into buying good quality potting mix from the store. If you have a compost, or buy a compost from a reputable compost company, that will be ideal, that you can grow in it. So it must be free of diseases and weed seeds. It should be able to hold moisture and nutrient, but at the same time drain well. So the potting mix you buy in the bag, the compost you can buy in bulk, those fit these definitions. Although lately I have seen some of the compost coming from the large scale with some wheat seeds in it. Of course, not the small seeded weeds, but things like nutsedge, things that have a big nut that can't survive the steam, the cooking process of of the composting. So when you get media from a compost facility, do not expect it to be free of weeds. Don't be surprised if you see things like, I don't know, Bermuda grass or nutsedge, but at least those will be very easy to clean because of that limited volume you bought. Okay, of course, there are the synthetic soils. And synthetic soil is basically anything that you can think of, like when I'm talking like perlite or even peat is considered not native soil, so that can be considered as synthetic soil. You can make your own mixture if you can get horticultural grade perlite. I'll show you what the pictures, I'll show you some recipes. If you can get good quality coarse sand, not the fine sand or the play sand, that can be too fine, then it can stick together more. Bark, peat moss, limestone. You can make your own. So the easiest recipe, if you like, if you forget everything and you want to do one today, even before you receive the copy of this file, is 1 part sand, 1 part peat, and 1 part bark. Because perlite, that may not be, or vermiculite, those may not be available everywhere. And if you just have some peat and bark and some sand, even if you don't have peat, you just have sand and some compost, that is just fine too. 50-50 sand and 50% compost is also a perfect combination. All right, so in this picture here, in the middle, you'll see is the peat that is, collected from what used to be lakes and thousands of years ago. And on the left is the perlite, the fine perlite or coarse perlite, and vermiculite. I don't see vermiculite used anymore. And if you don't use it, not a big loss. If you want to use it, wet it really well before you use it, because it can grow. I mean, it can go airborne. It flaky. It flakes easy, and it's very dusty. And some people are very sensitive to that irritation in the lungs. So wet it really well. But if you can skip that vermiculite and you start with these two, perlite and peat, that's fine. Perlite and sand, that's fine, because that's not available everywhere, the perlite, but peat can be available, or from, like, I mean, the cheap equivalent is compost from any compost store. So this slide shows you possible mixes. You can grow in 100% sand, no problem. You can grow 50-50 sand and compost. Just remember, with practice, you'll learn that, hey, sand is great, but sand will drain fast. So maybe your watering schedule is different than if you're working with, you get a potting mix, which can hold water 2 or 3 days longer than if you were working with 100% sand. So here is a recipe, like 50-50 sand and perlite. Sand and rice hulls. If you live in a part of the country, like say like Beaumont, where the rice hulls, you can get it by the ton for free. Sand and bark, sand and pine bark, sand and peat moss, all that. Of course, sand and pine bark, that is ideal when you're working with bark, which is like mulch. That's not really compost. That is better the second year or third year when it had time to break down. So those two options, sand and redwood bark or sand and pine bark, those I don't recommend them for a vegetable. But if you want to grow something long-term, like asparagus or a blackberry, or something that's going to be in this in that pot long-term, that's fine, because the second year it gets better with age, I guess, like wine, and the third year that mixture is better than the first year. Okay. All right. And if you are lucky that you have mushroom compost near you, I just said that sand and compost 50-50 is great. Well, if you put mushroom compost instead of the compost, that's even better, because mushroom compost means it's compost that comes with its own fertilizer built in. So here you go. You got the sand, you got the compost, and you got the built-in leftover fertilizer that came with the mushroom compost. So you can mix it, or you can buy good quality potting mix, and it looks just like that. You can't go wrong with it. Fill it there. So there's lots of brands available out there. Sometimes they have a good sale. So instead of a $5 a bag, it's $2.50. That's a great buy all you can. Trust me, it's worth the investment than trying to make your own recipe. Because those have been tested for a long time, and they're really the potting mixed by a reputable company are the best. Okay. All right, where do you put those pots? Here's the container that's from a, what do you call it, barrel, what do you call it, whiskey barrel, cut in half. So you got two of them, or cut lengthwise, so you can have two of them, but a bigger for shallow vegetables, herbs, that's fine. Where do you put those? Well, as much sun as possible. Well, in Texas, everywhere is sun, unless you put your pots on the north end of the house or in between two houses. Let's say you live in a subdivision, do not put them in between those two houses because that's not enough sun. But on the north side of the house or on the south side of the house, if you have space, that is best. If you have trees and north side of the house where your garden is, that's not ideal. So think of a location where you have full sun until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, if that garden location is fully shaded by your house or by a big tree, as long as they had full sun until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, consider yourself lucky. Those plants got all the light they want in those 8 hours until 8 o'clock, until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Open area is great. You want good air circulation so you don't have stagnant air, which can invite, we already have humid conditions, so you don't want to encourage diseases to develop fast. Okay? Make sure it's fun and attractive. Here are plastic containers or terracotta or whatever. It's a hobby. It's got to feed the soul in addition to feeding your stomach. So something that looks pretty, it's just pretty to look at, not just physical labor. Because trust me, the tomato you can harvest from this picture here in the center container, those are very expensive tomatoes compared to what you can buy in the store. So if you want to have medication to relieve you from the guilt that this is a $5 tomato, at least the first year, and until you learn, and then you can get 30 pounds from one tomatoes. So to relieve that guilt, that it has to look pretty. It has to feed your eyes and your soul, not just feed your stomach. Okay. Now, next to the media, most important things, the other two is fertilizers and water. And a quick lesson on fertilizers. N, P, and K are considered macronutrients because the plants take a lot of them, like 1%. So that's why if you're familiar with 13 or 13, that's 13%. While the plant needs parts per million of the secondary and the micronutrient. So if you know that 1% is 10,000 parts per million, and you know that plants need 10% nitrogen and needs 1 parts per million calcium, you can see the difference in how much the plant needs N, P, and K, 10,000 times more. And for the micronutrient like boron and iron and manganese and all these, it needs 0.1, 0.2 parts per million. It's like a drop in a swimming pool of water. You think it's not going to be beneficial, but that minimum amount is necessary, otherwise the plant won't grow well. So I don't recommend as a beginner you try to mix your own recipe, buy a good quality fertilizer and use it. Of course, there are organic and inorganic fertilizer. I'll leave that choice to you. All I can tell you is that the plant does not know the difference between the two. Okay, the plant needs nitrate. It does not know it came from fish emulsion or it came from all-purpose Miracle-Gro. So that is what you like to use. And if you choose an organic fertilizer like the one you see here at the bottom or a chemical fertilizer, that is up to you. My personal friendly advice is if you want to be healthy and organic, stick to the pesticides because that is something you're spraying. And if you don't wash it well, it's possibly something that you eat later. Whereas fertilizers are never gonna bother you no matter what. So they're cheaper. Start with that until you learn how you're growing, what and where, and then later you can switch to organic fertilizers. But start with organic pesticides and chemical fertilizer. Great until you learn how you're growing and focus on the watering and the location and all this. And once you learned all this, then say, okay, I'm going to switch to something organic, and let's see how do the yields compare.
Dr. Joe,
Yes,
on
ma'am.
that topic, can you share maybe some of your favorite or popular organic fertilizers?
Ooh, well, Medina is a good option. A fish emulsion, and not as a brand name, but as choices. To me, fish emulsion, blood meal are the richest in nitrogen. So they're like 10-12% nitrogen, close to chemical fertilizers. So those are great. Generally, the organic fertilizer are 3% nitrogen, low amount. Great for herbs, but not enough for tomato or pepper or eggplant or potato. You know, so I think I have another presentation. Remind me at the end when I finish this presentation, I'll show you more options.
Absolutely. And also Dr. Joe gave us a program on fertilizing. I did put a link to that in the chat. It's also on the Dallas Public Library's YouTube page underneath playlist. If you look for Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability, you can find that. But I'm excited that Dr. Joe is going to share that information with us so that we can start off the new year fertilizing properly and not improperly, because that also affects our stormwater and it can affect the health of your plants, like you mentioned. Now, just one little tip I want to share is a fish emulsion is fantastic, but if you have dogs, they might love it just as much as your plants. So just keep an eye, because you might find your dog in your garden rolling or digging in your fish emulsion.
That is
all
true.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Joe.
That is true. And if you use fish emulsion in the garden, bury it, not just on the surface and let nature do its thing. Bury it so it gets a chance to break down faster, and of course to cover it from your cats and your dogs. Okay, back to the containers. Containers, especially with long-term crops like any of the fruiting vegetable, slow release fertilizers are also a great idea. I'm sure you're familiar with these food sticks or the Osmocote beads, which break down and release their nutrient content one at a time. That's why they're called slow release. You cannot go wrong with these in terms of, I put too much. I had a citrus tree in a 50-gallon container one year when I was in College Station, and I put an inch-thick layer of Osmocote on top of it. Never bothered it, because it's going to break down slowly and release the nutrient over a long time. So think about that. You cannot risk burning the plant when you're working with things like slow release fertilizers, whether they are tablets or unfortunately, many of these are not organic choices. Okay. Macronutrient sources, of course, you can buy a micronutrient source, or this brand here by Medina, you see it's 001. That's not a fertilizer. What you get from using this is all the micronutrient, all the microorganisms that are waiting to come back to life and break down and start releasing the nutrient from your compost or from your mulch to your plants. So you cannot grow a tomato with this by itself. That's not a fertilizer. But if you add it, it will add what I call life to your potting mix, because it does contain all kind of micronutrients. And here's a third brand by Scott's company, Micromax, micronutrient to the maximum potential. Okay, watering is the most difficult question for me, because there's not a simple, recipe or a trick I can tell you. The rule for May does not apply for 1st of June and does not apply for July. And your location, a 5-gallon container pot is different than a 1-gallon pot. So there's not. I do recommend that you buy a soil moisture probe. Get something, don't get the toy, the $5 one. Get the $25 one that's a little bit more accurate, has a better sensor, and this way you know if you're watering on time, and then use it regularly, use it religiously the first year so that you learn and take notes. This way you know in this 10-gallon container or 5-gallon container, hey, in June I was watering every 3 days, but in end of June, according to the probe, I noticed that I have to now water every 2 days or twice a day in July. Your notes can help you, so you don't have to recreate the wheel every year. You learn from your own notes and from your own personal experience. Okay, and never look at the soil surface as a guide. I mean, unless you're in immediate, like the first day of seedling or the first few days. But once the plant have roots, at least an inch below the surface is where the moisture, most of the roots are, and where the moisture concern for you should be. So that's where the moisture probe I told you will help. Okay. Overwatering can be a problem as underwatering, and your biggest clue that you're overwatering, if you're using potting mix, is you start seeing algae or green stuff growing, or your peat. That's when you know you're overwatering. Peat turns dark brown or almost black when it's wet, and it's brown, light brown when it's dry. If the surface is brown, that's fine. Like I said, because the soil surface is not the indication. Let it between watering, soil surface turn a little brown. This way you know the soil surface dried, and hopefully 50% moisture level is inside that container, which is where you want to be. Never say, oh, it turned brown, time to water it again. It needs time to dry between watering. Of course, and of course, in May, that time could be 3 days. In July, that time could be 3 hours. So it's not a one set rule. Some people with experience know from the weight of the pot that, oops, that's too light, time to add water to it. Okay, and always leave at least an inch minimum empty. Don't fill it to the rim with the potting mix, because you need that 1 or 2 inches empty. So when you water it, you want to flood it and let it soak slowly until you see water coming out from the bottom. This way, any fertilizer or any salts, salts that you added with your water, you flushed it with the second watering. And by salt, I don't mean sodium and chloride like table salt. All fertilizers are considered salts, and the plants need them. But if you add too much, they will burn the roots of the plants. So that's why I recommend every time you water, or at least once a week, if you water 3 times, every 3 times, water it till you see coming out of the holes at the bottom of the container, so you leach it from whatever accumulated over that past week in the pot. Okay. This one, I was in College Station, you see all these containers, that's where my container garden ended up being, packed nicely on the side of the wall. I decided, hey, because I couldn't fine tune the watering, it's like I'm still in my mentality, Michigan or Kentucky, oh, they can last every 3 days, even with this 30-gallon pot, they don't. So the olives and the blueberries, they managed, their trees, their olives, they drought tolerant, of course, by nature. But all the vegetables, I decided to go into raised beds and go from there. So if you do want to have container and you want to be successful, you need something like this. Only when I started using a timer, and all of these are available from Lowe's and Home Depot, backflow preventer, a splitter. splitter, so you can have a hose for watering by hand and another outlet to the timer. This is not available at Lowe's and Home Depot. It's the brand name is Easy Flow. So EZFLO. Look it up online. Many stores that sell garden supplies sell it, or landscape supplies have it, or from Amazon. At the time, it was about $50, maybe now it's $70 for a 1-gallon container. You mix your fertilizer solution here, and then every time you're watering, that you're fertilizing at the same time. I travel. I don't worry about, oops, I forgot to water my plants or forgot to fertilize it. And I'm a believer that, especially with pots and container, mix a average concentration, not a full concentration. And every time you water, if you fertilize with it at the same time, it's like you snacking every half hour. Maybe your total calories is still the same as a full meal, as a regular diet if you eat 3 meals, but you never go hungry between those bites, between those 3 meals. And plants love that. If plants never go hungry, they are growing at a constant speed. That is what they do in a commercial operations, in a greenhouse operation. They push the plants to grow at a constant speed, so water and fertilizer is never missing. What do we do in a garden? You fertilize them once, and then 3 weeks later, you fertilize them again. Well, between those, they feast, and then I hope you can see my hand, feast, and then slowly get hungry until 3 weeks later when you feed them again. Versus in this approach where they're at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they are never hungry. They're getting the same amount of food because every time they are being watered. So great tip, especially with containers. I've tried all of these. I've tried the bucket, upside down bucket, and they can work. But at the time, I did not have the automatic timer. So, especially tomato. Tomato is a heavy feeder, needs a lot of fertilizer and needs a lot of water. So if it stresses once a week, it will never wilt. It will never show you it wilted, but you'll see it in the yield. So instead of getting something like this with 30, 40 fruits, you get something like this that it looks pretty and it has 2 fruits on it. So with tomato, with the fruiting vegetable, if you want to do container and you want to be successful, I suggest an automatic timer with a drip irrigation, not leave it to watering by hand. That's my, and I guarantee you success. Peppers are more forgiving. Peppers, tomatoes are more forgiving. Of course, some varieties you can grow them in a 1 gallon, but if you really want bell pepper, a minimum 5 gallon container, if not more. And if you truly want to be successful, again, automatic drip irrigation is better. Okay, green beans, bush type beans seems to be very forgiving to mistakes if you forget to water them. Vine type, yeah, I don't recommend them because you need a bigger pot, like at least 5 gallon, at least 20 gallon, like you see here. So if you want to go that big, might as well plant it in the ground, like you see in the picture here. If you have that space and you need that much soil, too much expensive, I'd rather dig a hole and plant it in the ground. To me, more smarter decision. But bush type beans, they can tolerate a smaller pot and still be very productive. Squash and cucumber also can be very productive. Just get the bush type of both squash and cucumbers so that they have limited and don't run everywhere and don't need the large volume of roots to go with the large size plants that they want to develop. Melons, they can be done, and I've seen people use the recycled pantyhose to hang the fruit and attach it to the frame so it doesn't break from the vine on its own weight. Here is a watermelon, and I've seen it, and here it is. Here's a picture of the tying the melon with a pantyhose, tying it to the chicken wire or cattle panel so it doesn't fall from its own weight. a little extra work, but hey, if you have limited space or a balcony, you just have to learn to be, of course, another advantage of putting this in a pantyhose is that it resists a lot of the insects because they don't like to walk, crawl on that. I've seen like squash bug land and then they fly away. I don't know the texture of, or they cannot find a hole to. I don't know what it is, but seems to help with insect repellent if you use it. Okay, salad gardening, you see shallow pots will do fine. These are pretty, not just eye pleasing to the eye. You see basil, you see Swiss chard, you see lettuce in the front. So it is what we call, what do you call them? Ornamental edibles. So it's ornamental, looks pretty, but at the same time, it's edible. You don't need to harvest this whole lettuce. You can harvest the outside leaves to thin it out, give it space, and then have it. If you take two or three leaves from each of these, that's a salad meal. And one leaf of or two leaves Swiss chard, few peppers or few basil leaves, then it's a meal, but you still have a container. It does not have to be grown like in this picture here, where you have a variety of lettuces, beautiful in the texture and colors. You don't have to wait till it's mature and harvest it all. No, you can take a few leaves and have an instant, and then, so basically like cut and grow. Cut and grow for a second cut. So I've taken this picture from a friend who traveled to what part of Asia, I forget. And here they're using PVC pipe and filled it with their own gravel mixture that they have, and all lettuces can do very well. And of course, this is being watered. It's very shallow, but as long as water is constantly there, so it's not a container, modified container, I guess you want to call it, but it can be done. Here is the toilet seat that I told you with broccoli, cabbage and cauliflower. It can be done. Of course, these are bigger plant that needs a lot of root. So in a 5-gallon container, I will put only one plant, just like I would put in a tomato, one plant. But pepper, I can put two in there in a 5-gallon container. So more pictures, urban containers. I'll show you my mint in a second. I've seen these that you can buy, and that's fine. And you can water, and then water will on top, and water will seep in. So I wouldn't put, if I were to use this, I wouldn't put this plant on top. I leave it empty with 3-4 inches because I want to have enough space to add 3-4 inches of water so it can soak in and keep that whole level, all of that filler moist. Okay, I've seen people make their own containers from mixture of foam and concrete or wire and concrete, baskets with flour, save them, recycle them next year. Strawberries has a shallow root system, confined, so it can grow very well in those container systems. Okay, these pictures I took a couple of days ago from my greenhouse. Welcome to come visit here. So this is a Dutch bucket, which is a container gardening. It's just that it's plumbed so that here's the fertilizer tank and the plumbing. So here's the intake, the water coming in. Let me see, is there a close-up? No. Coming in, and 2 emitters to each bucket. And then any excess water goes into the tube that's at the bottom and goes back to the tank or goes to the outside, goes as waste. So just like the system I showed you, where I have a timer and on the wall that I bought from Lowe's and Home Depot, and I had wire plumbed with the hose and what we call these, we call them spaghetti tubing because they're flexible like spaghetti, available at any garden center or online with an emitter, and you water your plant with this way. And this is, by the way, this is Sweet and Neat tomato. You see, this is a couple of months old. It should be a lot bigger and it should be harvested by now, but this time of year, there's not enough light. So I'm honestly pleased that they are starting to flower. I thought there would not be enough light for them to grow at all, but they're doing well. These are moringa trees, moringa, 19% protein in what do you call it? Africa and Central and South America. They eat the leaves, they make tea from it. Pods are edible, the roots are edible. I mean, people call it the magic plant because everything is edible from it, and it's 19% protein. So it's a filler for people, for animals, for chicken, for fish. I'm doing an experiment with that. So, and here's it going in the pot. In the summer, we're watering it once a day. This time of year, once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks. That's the difference in water requirement, just because it's cooler and less light intensity. I've shown you this before. So if you have such a system with the spaghetti tubing going to each pot like these here, okay, here is the close-up. So this is a $1,700 system if you want to buy it with the tank, everything. You can find all the parts at Lowe's and Home Depot, the pump, the splitter. You don't need a pump if you're using city water. It comes under pressure. Actually, you need a pressure reducer. But this flexible tubing and the spaghetti tubing and the emitters and with this timer and fertilizer tank, you can build it a lot cheaper. This is a commercial system I bought as a kit just to have classes show and tell. So you see the mixture. The pot is 100% perlite. That's what came with it. So this time I'm using that. Actually, it looks a little green because algae grew in it, but that's not gonna hurt anything. I'm growing in it now Mizuna and some chard, some mustard greens. This would be a nice toy, like I told you, instead of the $5 toy, which tells you warm, which kind of like if you stick your finger in the oven, it's not going to tell you 375 degree. It's going to tell you warm or burning hot. So that's not accurate, but you spend $25 toy. Actually, this one even measures moisture, light, and pH. I usually use it for moisture, and you see in the center bar here, the green is where you want it to be. In the blue, it's wet, and the red, it's dry. So stick it in there, and you see, and that's 6 inches. So you can stick it minimum 3-4 inches, or as the plants get bigger, stick it deeper. And then it'll tell you, hey, I'm in the green, forget watering, and make a note of that. These are a tomato and an eggplant that I'm growing in a container in pure water, pure fertilizer and water. Can you grow plants in water? The roots will rot. I mean, we know that. You can't, plants don't like wet feet. You can if you add this air stone, like an aquarium tank, aquarium pump, to bubble air in that water. As long as that oxygen, the dissolved oxygen is high enough, the roots and the plants don't mind. And they never stressed in water because they're sitting in water. As long as you have 24-hour pump running, the air pump running, and many greenhouse operations are switching to something like this. It's just the electricity cost can be like that. Can be higher because the air pump is running all the time. This mint is at least 15 years old. You know, and actually this time I divided into, so I have 4 babies from the same plant, growing in a 1-gallon container. But it's not, it is the same plant, but it's not really the same plant, because every 2 or 3 years when these roots become root bound, This picture right now. So when this is really bad and the whole the height, the whole depth of the pot is full with these root-bound root, it is time to pull it, remove it from the pot, and I usually cut at least inch or 2 inches from the outside, cut it, throw it away. So now I'm down to a core of the plant roots and the crown, and then refill it with new pot material to allow the plants to grow into it with the fertilizer with that. You do that, you are basically growing your own bonsai mint, if you want to call it. I mean, it's 15 years old, but it needs annual maintenance so you can trim that roots. Otherwise, it will exhaust and it will choke itself to death. And here's some bok choy I have right now in pots. They were crowded together, so we ate a lot of them as baby bok choy, and then I wanted a few larger, so we separated them and put them into individual gallon pots, and so they can get as big as possible. Of course, the greenhouse is heated, so it's ideal condition. And I have this stock tank with the fertilizer injector. So whenever I water, I'm fertilizing with about 150 parts per million. You don't know how to do that, ask your county agent, email me, we'll show you how to calculate. I'm sure many fertilizer bags will tell you, like you put teaspoon or teaspoon and a half in a gallon to get the perfect concentration. That's fine, but please don't be generous. If it tells you teaspoon, don't put 2. That 2 is better. Not only you're wasting it and you may burn the plant, but just like Helen said, if that gets into the water, it's excess nutrients and it's pollution. Okay, that is my last presentation. I'm open for questions. I'll stop sharing my screen. No, I'll stop sharing the screen if you have any.
Okay, Dr. Joe. Everybody is super excited and they got lots of questions for you. Okay, so this is going to be like rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Of course.
Okay, so earlier we had you touched on fertilizers, and you mentioned, and I shared that you had done a fertilizer presentation with us. Now, just a couple more questions about fertilizing. Okay, do you need to fertilize differently if your plants are indoors versus outdoors? And can you talk a little bit about, because a lot of people have moved plants inside for the winter. Could you talk a little bit about fertilizing indoors for indoor plants?
If you move your plants indoors, I would say forget fertilizing maybe once a month, or fertilize them when you first move them and then forget them, because they're going to grow so slow and whatever you add will be more than enough. If you are growing indoor plants, then again, once a month, year round at the most, with fertilizer, not more than that. Not more than that. Of course, that doesn't apply for the thousands of indoor plants that you can grow, but as a general rule, I would say in the winter, no more than once a month. In the summer, maybe every 2 weeks. Some people tell you once a week. No, leave that for watering once a week, and then in the winter, once a week fertilizing, for watering once a month. I would say fertilizing, don't overdo it, unless you are willing. I mean, you can add more fertilizer, but then the plants will grow faster and it get too big and it becomes root bound, like I showed you on the mint. Are you willing to lift that 100-pound ornamental, whatever you call it, something or another, and you to trim the roots and repot it? May not be feasible. So it looks pretty. You want to find the balance between let it grow slow enough to survive, but fast enough to survive. Don't let it grow too much unless you're willing to lift it, repot it, trim the roots, add new pot, and then grow it well.
Good point. Thank you. All right. So very early in your presentation, you talked about like different varieties of vegetables that do well in containers, and you had a really pretty picture of a melon plant. Do you happen to remember the name of that melon?
No. But melon, they're not there's no melon varieties that made for, so search for something that's called bush type melons. Oh, that will be fine. That one that I have here, yes, I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the list that I showed you. It does not include melons, but I guess we can go quick search online. Sorry, weakness.
No problem. No problem.
I'll fix it.
And also for everyone who registered, the library will send out an email in a few days. And like Dr. Joe said, it will have a PDF version of the PowerPoint. So you will get that list of plants in that email. And if you didn't register through the library, just send an email to greendallas@dallascityhall.com, and I'll make sure that you get that information. Okay, so we have a person who has done some container gardening. However, they always end up with fire ants in their containers. Do you have any tips to help them with the fire ants?
My tip is bifenthrin, but a lot of people don't like to use it because it's not organic. It works like magic. And to me, if that bifenthrin type is the medication you put for fleas and ticks on your dog, to me it is that safe to sprinkle like a teaspoon of it or a half a teaspoon of it in your pot, and that will kill them and kill 99% of them, and the rest will go somewhere else. I've seen people say use hot water, but you want to use hot water, okay, you kill 10-20%, but then you burn the roots of your plants. So yeah. In the old days, like where I grew up, we used to put the legs of the bed in a big tub of water. This way the ants will not swim. Very few of them like to swim, to crawl on the bed and come bite you. The fire ants, I think the fire ants can swim. You know, they can stick together as a ball to survive flooding, but will they swim? So maybe a way is see if you can put your container in a larger flat tub and fill it with water. It'll serve two purposes. You're watering it from the bottom up, and this way you have a moat, M-O-A-T for. But if you have nothing against bifenthrin, sprinkle a little bit on that, and that you can get rid of it.
Yes.
Sir, I did a quick search, and the keywords I used is bush melon varieties, and here's one that list tells you five mini melons for small gardens and containers. So Golden Jenny, Minnesota Midget, Sleeping Beauty, Green Machine, and Honey Bun. So if you don't have time to memorize all these, just search for the same keywords of bush melon varieties or bush type melon, and you'll see a lot of them available.
All right, some of those I want just because of the name of those, like honey bun. I want to say that I grow honey buns, so I'm going to get one of those. So also on the fire ants, another option is to try using diatomaceous earth. So this is crushed up shells of microscopic creatures, and they basically cut and slice anything that crawls, like insects that crawl over it, and then they dry out or desiccate. So I have used this. I have a pond in my backyard, and we have some rocks around it. And so it was freshly turned soil. And so the ants just loved it, right? They built their fire ant nest under my rocks. So I used this because I didn't want it to affect my fish and get into the water and all that sort of stuff. So it took a couple of applications, and I just sprinkled it in there. It took a couple of applications, and I know other people have had success with this. So diatomaceous earth, it is, now you need to get food grade. Now, not the stuff you use in your pool filter. You get full, and like I got this at a feed store. So that's an option you have. And then also I do know some people have used nematodes, like beneficial nematodes in their soil. And there are some that will target fire ants. But what I learned from Heather Rinaldi from Texas Worm Ranch is that the nematodes, like there's different nematodes for different things. And you need to make sure you get the right one. So like if you just buy some generic nematodes off a shelf, you might not be getting the right nematode for your problem. So there's some companies online that sell specific types of nematodes. And speaking of nematodes, we had a question that comes in. So this person does use beneficial nematodes in their soil. Would they survive in a container? And is that something you'd suggest to use for indoor containers or just in the ground?
I've never used, honestly, nematodes, so I have little experience with that. If you put, but what I would say is just like nature and everything else I know, you add nematodes if the environment is suitable there, like it doesn't freeze. You leave the pot outside, the plant dies, and the pot freezes, and it doesn't dry out like extreme that the nematode may die, then you can have them there for life. They, some will die. They make more babies, so the balance is there. Um, but it wouldn't hurt to add a little bit more, just like you would add compost to replenish what was lost. Wouldn't hurt to add a little bit more once in a while. But I've never used it. I've never done it, so I can't tell you if they are good on fire ants or not. So.
All right, no problem. So earlier you were sharing with us some recipes to make your own soil for your containers.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like there's a lot of combinations that will work. Are you familiar with Texas green sand, and would that work in a mixture for containers?
Yeah, Texas green sand, I think it has extra iron in it or some minerals built in it. So yeah, it's if it's available and you can afford it, it's not bad. You just don't want beach sand if you're close, let's say in Beaumont, because there you have the salt issue, and unless you wash it. But clay sand you buy from the store, that can be fine. Also, not the best, the clay sand, because it's kind of fine, but if that's the only thing available, add it to your compost and use it fine.
All right. Okay, so so speaking of compost, one of our participants has 2 rabbits, and they compost their litter box, which has wood pellet litter and Timothy hay, and of course the rabbit droppings. Can you speak on how that can be used to build or amend the soil?
They're composting their little litter box.
Yeah, the rabbit litter box.
If they are using the litter box directly into the pot and growing vegetable in it, that may not be a good idea, because it may be too hot in terms of the nutrients, and you never know, possibly E. coli or something that can you get from it. But if you take it and put it with the coffee grind, that if you made coffee, banana peels, and compost it, and then use the compost that's better. I never recommend what I call fresh manure, because to me this is fresh. It's not composted. Even if it's sat and dried, let's say cow patty sat in the field dry for 5 years, that is still considered fresh, because the bacteria in it is dormant. You just add water and they come back to life, including E. coli, including salmonella. But when it's composted, that's when it's cooked, and the heat and process and broken down, etc., that is more suitable. So don't use it fresh, compost it, and then use it. Like add to it some chips, wood chips, the cheapest kind, but the smaller the better. And then mix it, add moisture, keep it in a cool place, and then you'll see in a month it's ready to use in the garden.
All right.
Better.
All right. Okay, so okay, let's talk a little bit about sun for plants. Okay, so you mentioned that plants thrive when they get sun until 2 o'clock. What about plants that are out in the sun all day? Should we be, do they require extra care? Are they going to thrive? Do you recommend having plants in the sun all day?
Well, if you have drip irrigation, that doesn't matter. More sun is no problem. Just use that soil moisture probe and realize, oh, I need to add more watering 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It dried out real bad. But I know people that put a shade cloth over their patio starting in, let's say, June, mid-season. By then, the day is long, and definitely not in the beginning of the season because it's still cool and the sun is not very strong. But mid-season, let's say June, depending on where your area is, and you cut 40%, 30% of the light, those plants enjoy the shade, and it's not really full shade like you get from a tree, but it's nicer for you and nicer for the plant. So that is one option. Leaving a plant, even a 5-gallon pot in full sun, yeah, sure, no problem. Just pay attention with regular visits and see, you may have to water it every day.
That's a good point. All right. And then just a little tip on watering. So like Dr. Joe mentioned, like you might have to leave your plants for a day or two. And also maybe even just a cut back on hand watering is taking something simple like a big glass jar, and you can punch a hole in the lid, fill this with water and invert this into your pot. And it will, and get it, like he said, get that at least an inch into the soil, right? Because you want to get it to the roots, and then it will drip water. And so sometimes I've had these last 3 days, it kind of just depends, like you said, how hot it is outside, right? And also how thirsty your plant is, because some drink more than others. And this helps me cut down on having to water every day, all my containers, because that can be a chore. And also for, if you put anything in the ground, it's also a good marker so that you remember that you have a tender plant that might need a little bit more care, and to go check on it more often if it's like mixed in your landscape with other plants that are more mature and established and don't need as much water. So something as simple as this, but of course that drip irrigation system, that can solve a lot of problems because you can also feed it through that system like how you showed us. So that's pretty awesome. I have to admit, I'm a little jealous. That kind of beats my glass bottle system right there. So
I saw a comment. What's wrong? It's easy flow, no W. So I wrote it again here, easy FLO. And you just search easy flow and you'll see it's like three-quarter gallon for $52. Sprinkler Warehouse sells them, Drip Depot, lots of online places. It shows Home Depot, but I don't know. No, that's something else. Yeah, so but easy flow, not no W at the end.
All right.
Okay, next question.
Okay, do you recommend that we put saucers underneath our containers to catch water?
Yes, I do that because sometimes I add water at the bottom, especially when they are shallow plants, and then water them from the bottom up. Yeah, I like that because, and also for cosmetic, because like I told you, when I water, I want to see water coming out from the bottom. If they're sitting on concrete, with time, you're staining the concrete from the excess fertilizer or the brown water. I mean, the brown that comes from the peat. So to avoid less staining. That's
all right. And what about how often should you change your potting soil, and what can you do with spent or old soil?
When I grow my potatoes and tomatoes and all this at the end of the season, I dig them up. And of course, I have a lot of it, so I don't have to recycle it. I put it on my raised bed. So I recycle it there. If you want to recycle it in its place, I suggest you put it in your compost, add with your compost first, let it cook, let the heat cook any diseases that the first plant will not give the second plant, the tomato, next year. If you're sure there are no diseases and you grew things, let's say like lettuce, you harvest it in 30, 40 days, you can just plant something else following immediately. That's no problem. But from year to year, I suggest you send it somewhere else, recycle it somewhere else, under the tree, around the bushes, flower bushes, things like that. Or mix it with fresh and then recycle it that way, like 50-50 with fresh, and recycle it that way.
That's a good idea. All right, so this is an interesting question. Okay, so is there an effective way to remove algae from a terracotta pot's exterior without having to transplant the vegetable?
Yeah, get some Clorox bleach and put some gloves with the bleach and a scrub and scrub it. The Clorox bleach will kill them. Yeah, if you don't want that concentrated, that the smell bothers you, you can make it, I don't know, 10% concentration and then spray it and let that kill it with time. It has to be physical removal. Just don't spray, watch the bleach doesn't get into the pot accidentally, especially if it's concentrated, because it'll burn the roots.
Absolutely. All right. So you showed us your beautiful mint plant, right?
Mm.
So one of our participants has a mint, but it always gets thin and scraggly in a container. Do you have some tips for that?
It will get, what time of the year is thin and scraggly? If they can.
Add that into the chat. Oh, they said
Le-
always.
Always? Are they repotting it? Oh, this? Well, yours is this thin because it's indoors. Mine look nice because it's in a greenhouse with a lot of light, with a lot more light. So a lot more light, closest to the window, south window. I would leave it outside on the patio, and then only on a very cold night that's going to be, let's say 40 or below, then move it in to protect it from the cold. Let it get as much sun from outside, because this weather is ideal. They love this cool weather. They give you beautiful small leaves, tender, but you don't want it to freeze. So leave it outside, only bring it in until it gets, if it's going to get less than 40, and you'll see them do better. Right now, this plant is just surviving because it's basically, our eyes are very efficient. When you look around, you see, oh, that's plenty of light. But the plants, they're getting 1% of the light that they want to grow. So they're surviving, barely surviving.
Yeah, and I do agree that mint does need a lot of light. And also she mentioned that maybe she does have it in a container outside and maybe it's root bound, but mint can be very vigorous and it can get root bound very easily.
Yeah.
And,
So
yeah.
if you can take it out and show us the roots, or see compared to my roots, if they look like my plants, they can be there for another season. If they're brown roots and dead roots and circled all around and they're already brown and dead, time to give it a shave and put new mix and fertilizer and put it in a good location with lights, and they'll be fine.
Right. And also sometimes clipping it can help it, like basil, you pinch basil and it gets bushier. Mint also enjoys that. If you clip it and use it, it likes that and it grows back even more vigorous.
And sometimes one last option with mint, it roots very easy. So if that pot is, just take a cutting, put it in a cup of water, and when it roots, start a whole new plant and forget. Sometimes don't get attached to the mother plant. Don't get attached to it. Take a cutting from it and grow a new plant. It's still the same plant, just not that same physical one. And it's much better. Start with new potting mix. Start with it's worth it.
Okay.
Especially with mint, because it roots very easy, even in water.
It sure does. And it's great to gift to people.
Yes.
All right, Dr. Joe. So here we got a question. What do you think the minimum volume of a container would have to be so air pruning holes for the roots is effective?
Say that again.
What do you think the minimum volume of a container would have to be so air pruning holes for the roots are effective?
Are those the pots with holes all around that can, in theory, the roots reach there and they dry out and they die? So that's what they call air pruning.
The person said yes.
If that's the one, I have seen them as small as a gallon container, a gallon size, no smaller, but again, managed intensively, because they're growing, ornamentals, not usually used in vegetables. They're used for ornamentals because they're long-term crops. So yeah, 1 gallon is fine if you water them more often, because with all these extra holes, more chance of the media inside to dry out.
All right. So here we go. A question about squirrels. Every gardener's worst enemy, squirrels. So this person has a lot of squirrels constantly digging in their pots. Do you have any tips on how to keep squirrels out of your containers?
I don't think the squirrels are digging to eat anything. I wonder if they're digging to bury nuts or that. That's my guess. They don't eat roots. They don't eat, I mean, even if it's potato root, they're not going to dig it to eat it. That's my guess. So, yeah, I don't know.
Sounds like you'd have to put a cage over your pot.
Yeah, exactly, like a wire cage. A wire cage on the surface. The plants can grow through it, but the squirrel can. And then, of course, tied with like some screws and tightened so it doesn't fall. Yeah, something like that.
And then also maybe cats or dogs might help with that. I know my dog is a good squirrel deterrent in my yard. And then
or a squirrel trap, squirrel live trap, catch him and then drop him at your neighbor's yard or something you don't like.
that's always an option that you have. Okay. Now I have heard some people say they have success with using like cayenne pepper and different things like that. I don't know how. I have personally not tried that. And I think also like after you water, you have to reapply, because you want it to be dusty. So when they dig, it kind of like, poofs up in a cloud and and then it deters them. So you could also try that. Okay. So here we go. Here's a good question. I'm planning on doing 200 self-wicking buckets this spring and was wondering how many of each plant I can plant in a 5-gallon bucket.
What's the crop?
They didn't say.
Well,
they're still on, if you don't mind adding that into the chat.
Yeah, they're, I mean, you saw the picture I showed you of my Dutch bucket system. They are about a gallon size. That's one tomato plant. But I put 4 lettuce in there in the same place. So 5 gallon, even if it's a 5-gallon container, with drip irrigation, automatic irrigation system, you can put 2 tomato plants in there at most, 3 pepper plants, 2 eggplants, herbs and things. I think it's a shame to use a 5-gallon container for herbs because too deep and it's not needed. So go for something shallow that has more surface area and like more like 6 to 8 inches deep at most is fine. Why fill a 5-gallon when only the 6 inches is used by the lettuce? You waste all that bottom volume for nothing. So depending on the crop, but like I said, from first thing I started with this lecture, I failed at container gardening until I learned the necessity of timer and drip irrigation.
That's a good point. All right. So we have a question about pomegranate plants or trees. Do you have any tips or recommendations on where to get information about how to grow and germinate pomegranates?
Pomegranate, you need to go to a tree that's growing in the spring and take cuttings like last year's wood. It's not soft, it's like still green, but 1 year old, like what grew this year, and then you go cut it next spring. So you get things that are 6 inches, and then if you can use rooting hormone, that'll be great. If you don't, I think we've done it without it, and then just stick them. So in a 1-gallon pot, you can put 30 of them together just to root, and then when they root, you can separate them, and you have your new tree. It's not from seed. I mean, air layering, if you want to do that, look up air layering, you can do that. And then this way you can start immediately with a bigger branch. Air layering where you shave a little bit of the stem and then you put a ball filled with media surrounding that stem. and then that will root. That's really moist, and then the plant will root, and then you cut it below that ball, and then you open the ball, and then you have a plant. So you can do that on a bigger plant, but if you cuttings is the best, definitely not from seeds.
Wow, I just learned something that I have never really heard of that air layering before. I actually have a pomegranate tree, but it came with my house, and it does send out shoots all over the place. So, and I've had people now I know that's why people knock on my door and ask me, because I guess they're popular, and maybe trying to propagate them is takes a tiny little bit of work. Because I've had people knock on my door and ask me for like some of the babies off of my tree. So.
If the seeds dropped and survived, or it made roots and then grew from the roots, just cut that. If it has its own root, that's fine too, no problem.
All right. Okay, so you had mentioned about like growing plants in water and the air pump. So we got a question about that. Can the air pump with a 5-gallon water bucket run less than 24 hours effectively? Would 12 or 16 hours suffice?
Yes. This time of year, I've grown them without air pump at all. The cold water, especially if the water can stay cold, with the place you put them in is cool and the water stays cold, it can hold oxygen in the water longer, no problem. It's just that in the middle of summer, that's not going to survive, because hot water is not going to hold oxygen, and then that's when it's 24 hours necessary. But right now, if you go on vacation and the pump died on you for 2 days, they're still alive. They may not grow 100% speed, like they'll slow down in their growth, but they're not going to die this time of year, as long as the water's cold. So yes, but in the summer, no, 24 hours, no problem. Right now, don't use a pump if you don't have, and you'll be smaller, less yield on that lettuce. It'll be smaller, but at least you can get, they'll be fine.
All right, so Dr. Joe, this is my air pump for my aquarium. Is this what I can use also to grow plants?
Yeah.
All right.
If you can have a splitter, if it's strong enough to have a splitter, fun for your aquarium, one for that bucket, sure.
Wow, it looks like I know what I'm going to do over holiday break. Okay.
Send me pictures.
Oh, we'll see if I succeed or not. Okay. So we had a question back about light, especially if you're growing containers on your patio. If your patio doesn't have sufficient light and you have to grow vegetables with light, which frequency of light spectrum should you use?
Well, we know plants need red and blue light. So a light bulb that's called white light, the white light bulbs that you use inside the house, those work fine. Fluorescent lighting is probably cheaper, in the sense they cost less than the LED white lights, and they use less electricity, and they last longer than light bulb. But LED white, fluorescent light bulbs, those work fine.
Okay, so interesting question. I literally just got these delivered while we were on this presentation, because I have a lemon tree in a pot, and I had to bring it inside, and of course it goes through a little bit of shock when you bring it in, and it's not getting as much light. So I got these 9-watt grow bulbs, and I had seen somebody else had used these for, when they transition their plants indoors, and then they're going to take them out, in the spring or the summer. And this is what they recommended. And I obviously I haven't tried them. They're still in the box. I literally just got them, and they're normal, kind of like Dr. Joe said, you just screw them into a regular lamp. So you just take out your bulb, put this one in, and supposedly this is pretty decent also for people, like if you want to read, or you're in that room and you need to do other things. So supposedly this is a decent one. I can't tell you for sure because I haven't used it, but I got it online. It wasn't that expensive, and it comes in a pack of 4. Okay. All right. We got a question about fig trees. All right.
I'm a vegetable guy.
I I know. We're really stretching you today. Okay. How long can fig trees thrive in a pot, and how large should the pot be for that tree?
Well, the bigger the pot, the bigger the plant. I went to a Japanese garden where was it? They had a fig tree that's like 100-year-old, but it was in like a 300-gallon container. But again, every few years they have to dig it up, prune the roots, and prune the top and redo it. So it can survive forever. Even if it freezes completely from a severe winter, the root on the ground will grow back. But if you want to keep it, you have to do severe pruning to the top and to the roots, and then that plant can be hundreds of years old. You don't. It's not hardwood that you want to build the frame and structure and stay there forever. No. Fig is softwood, and sometimes you have to cut a whole branch down to the ground and then start a new one as your new tree for the next few years. But yeah, but again, you have to trim the roots also, and that's and that rule will apply to anything.
All right, thank you. Okay, and so we're getting to 1:30, and so this is going to be our last question. All right. Now, Dr. Joe, this is about a houseplant. So we're really going to challenge you today, okay?
All right.
All right. So Grace, one of our frequent participants in these sessions. Hi, Grace. How are you doing today? She has a beautiful ivy that is in a space that hardly gets any sunlight. Will lamplight be sufficient to keep it healthy until spring? She's run out of window space.
Well, those lights, like you shown, will be fine, but they have to be close. I mean, if you put it in your light fixture in the middle of the room and think that the plant on the wall that's 6-7 feet away, again, your eyes are efficient. They see a lot of light, but the light intensity drops with distance. So unless you want to put a light and at least like 2-3 feet, maximum 2 feet away, you're not getting the full benefit of that extra light you have. So switch to a stronger light bulb, a white light, that kind of brand that you have, and closer to the plant, and they will do fine. They will do fine.
All right. Thank you so very much for sharing all of your growing knowledge with us. I think every time that you're here, I learned something. And we do have a short poll. If those remaining don't mind answering a few of our questions, this helps us develop programming, especially for 2021. We are going to continue this series Mondays at noon about gardening and growing and urban agriculture. And so your feedback helps us give you the presentations you wanted. Speaking of which, we actually do have a survey that goes out in the emails that you get. And container gardening was our #1 topic that showed up in the survey. And so what did we do? We brought Dr. Joe in to talk to you about container gardening. So we do listen to your feedback and we want to hear more. So please participate in this poll. And if you get the email from us, please participate in that survey also, so we can deliver you the programming that you want and that you need. And hopefully Dr. Joe can talk on those topics because we love having you here with us. And you're getting many, many thanks in the chat for sharing your time with us. And with that, we want to thank you for spending your 2020 with us, with the Dallas Public Library, with Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability, with Texas AgriLife Extension. We hope that you continue to grow, stay happy, healthy, and continue to learn. And we will see you in 2021. So we'll leave the poll up until the session closes. And again, if you have any questions, you can send them to greendallas@dallascityhall.com, and I will do my best to answer them for you. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much.